Welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic Practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. Today's topic is the term Monolatry, and where it comes from, what it means, how it applies to Egyptian religion. I first encountered this term on a Kemetic website several years ago, and my first reaction was, what? Because I never heard Monolatry before. And they use that to explain Egyptian religion, and they define it as, according to this website, it was defined as one Godhead with many gods. In other words, one divine essence that manifests in all of these different deities, incarnations, what have you. I wasn't very familiar with it because at that point I was used to treating the Egyptian deities on an individual basis. They were all different beings to me. So I decided to try and learn a little bit more about this. And it's been kind of an interesting journey over the years. And incidentally, I tried to save you guys a lot of heartache by putting the things that I found out in my own book, Following the Sun, Practical Guide to Egyptian Religion. It's available on lulu.com. I'll try to put a link at the end of this video for you. Now, monolatry actually doesn't mean quite what that particular website had put forth as it. One Godhead, many gods is actually more properly termed inclusive monotheism or pluriform monotheism. Monolatry was originally coined by a German biblical scholar in the late 1800s named Julius Wellhausen, and he was trying to describe the ancient Hebrew religion because we know that they had more than just the one God of the Old Testament. There were a whole bunch of other different deities. They acknowledged the existence of other deities. If you think about the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. What's interesting is I think a lot of Christian theologians today interpret that to mean, well, other things, putting money or vice before God, but actually at that time, when this was first put down, they acknowledged the fact that there were other deities. So then a German Egyptologist named Siegfried Moritz said, well, maybe we can apply this to Egyptian religion. Siegfried Moritz has written a lot of books on Egyptian religion. Some of these have been translated into English, but he argued very heavily for what he called monotheistic tendencies in Egyptian religion. He was actually one of many scholars, a long tradition that tried to argue this, and a lot of cultural bias kind of came into that. If you think about it, during the 19th century when Egyptology was really, forming as a discipline, most of the scholars who were in it were of the belief that polytheism is backward. All religions have to evolve toward monotheism. That's just the way of things. Well, not necessarily. You also have to think about Hinduism. And, of course, the British didn't always treat the Indians in their colonies that well, and one of the reasons why they looked down on them is because they thought Hinduism was a very backward religion. Well, all of this is discussed by a colleague of Siegfried Moritz named Erich Horno. He's another German Egyptologist who wrote a book called, let's see if I can get it where you can see it, Conceptions of God in Ancient Egypt, the One and the Many. This is a brilliant book. I recommend reading it, but make sure that you're already pretty familiar with Egyptian religion and history in general, because he writes this like he's lecturing to a college audience, and the book reflects that. I wouldn't recommend this for bedtime reading. You really got to be awake to catch this. But he overturns a lot of the ideas that people had about Egyptian religion being like a monotheism in disguise. And it's, very methodical the way he goes about it. He also mentions another term which has been used to describe Indian religion and Egyptian religion, and it's called henotheism. Henotheism is pretty similar, and again, I talk about this in my book and explain it, so I'm not going to spoil the book for you. But both of those terms, talk about the idea of there being many different gods, but people can focus on one at a time. And that's sort of how I approach it myself. I'm a polytheist. I think that there are a lot of different gods out there, and I don't think that they're necessarily aspects of one another. They can link together at times, and they can certainly be working on the same objective. But any one of those gods could be somebody's alpha and omega. Somebody could be all about, one particular deity, and that be their exclusive. But another one could be the alpha and the omega, the end-all be-all for somebody else. So, hopefully that will clarify a little bit of the expensive terminology that gets thrown around sometimes on Kemetic websites. I'm not naming any names here, but it really is helpful to understand some of this when you're getting into Egyptian religion and trying to understand it for yourself. So, for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon wishing you Synecdoche.